1984, Keith Haring made his first and his only trip to Melbourne and Sydney. The trip was organised by the Centre for Contemporary Art, which at the time actually didn't have a permanent home. So the CCA instead had to seek out some other opportunities at other cultural venues that would allow Haring to make art while he was here. Thankfully, one of those opportunities was at the NGV on the incredible Waterwall. Haring painted the mural in just 2 days. It's a pretty incredible intellectual and physical feat. He'd never visited the NGV before, he'd never painted on glass. He somehow managed to compartmentalise 3 different layers that at the end all come together to produce this very unique narrative, all in his mind with no preparation at all. And when you look at the work, you'll see that it features many of Haring's most characteristic forms and symbols. His chief aim in making art was to communicate and connect with the widest possible audience. He wanted children, people who weren't in the art world, to really be able to appreciate his work. So that's why a lot of his pieces were public facing, like the Waterwall. People who were just walking past the building could appreciate it just as much as someone who was in the building. Unfortunately, a brick was thrown at the central panel. As a result, the mural had to come down a fair bit ahead of schedule. Still to this day, there's a lot of speculation to what caused someone to throw the brick through the window. Different reasons have been put forward. One, which Haring himself believed was the motivation, was that it could have been linked to cultural appropriation, specifically the appropriation of imagery and symbols from Aboriginal art and culture. To mark 35 years since the mural's creation, the NGV has taken the opportunity to stage a contemporary reinterpretation. We've also taken the opportunity to interview a number of contemporary Indigenous Australian artists whose practice, like Haring's, intersects with public art in that they make works in civic shared spaces. So we have been lucky enough to gather their impressions on public art and its importance, Keith Haring and his legacy, and of course his trip to Australia and his extraordinary Waterwall mural.
I'm a proud Gubangri artist and painter, and for me my artistic practice is all about decolonising through street art. For me, street art is so important and so invaluable to a city because it's claiming spaces that aren't yours. It's physically putting myself in an environment and saying, I'm here, I'm alive, and I exist, and I'm not leaving.
I'm a Quandamooka artist from North Stradbroke Island, Manjeraba. I like to work with painting, sculpture, video work. My work seeks to challenge people's concept of ownership in Australia, our relationships with the environment, history, and how these things inform our identity.
I'm a Ngarigo fellow from the Snowy Mountains area of New South Wales, but it's taken me a while to reconnect to that through adoption. And I think adoption and my queerness have played a big role in who I am as an artist. My practice is really varied, so I call myself a mixed media artist.
I'm a Kamilaroi Gummaroi man based in Melbourne, grew up in Melbourne's western suburbs. I never went to art school. I got into doing art by doing graffiti in the late 80s in Melbourne, and then doing a bit of stenciling and looking at my family history and background in terms of where they come from. And that really fueled, I suppose, the political aspect of having a visual language through my work.
I'm interested in the public space because I think that as an Aboriginal person, historically we haven't had inclusion in society. So the public space is really interesting to me because it's a way to give voice to our issues. Mural making has always been a part of that. We bring what's important to us out to the streets and out to society.
One of the reasons I really enjoy making work in public spaces is you're not limited about who can see your artwork. You have this amazing voice through art and the ability to inform and raise awareness, particularly with Aboriginal affairs and our identity.
I think Haring's gone on to become part of popular culture. I'm wearing the t-shirt, they're still really available everywhere, and it's almost part of the pop culture we live in now. People mightn't even know who Haring is, but they know his work. And I think it's come to symbolise a lot about queer culture, people living with HIV, public access to art, and just has infiltrated into the masses.
I think Keith Haring for me is a really important artist just because he's reclaiming public spaces that aren't just like your typical gallery space. Working primarily in a gallery is so limiting, and why wouldn't you want to use every space possible, especially if it talks to your artwork and actually highlights your artwork just as much.
Keith Haring's outdoor work is really integral to a lot of us artists that saw that you could politically have a message and it was free for everyone to see. That was something that has always inspired me as an artist.
Based on the images that I've seen of the Waterwall, I think the thing is about the scale of it and how precise he was at doing such a large scale piece. I would have been really daunted as an artist, and yet he was able to do that whole wall and use his iconography, 3 layers of colour. I think it would have been amazing to see. I wish I had seen it.
I remember looking at the pictures and thinking, I don't know, they were just incredible. It's the first time I had ever seen him paint on glass, which I thought was amazing. And considering that he always painted on like a classic brick wall and it was 2-dimensional, you know, and to suddenly see it 3D and full of life is amazing. You know, it added a new element to what I knew Keith Haring's work to typically be.
It was something that he just rocked up from New York. He'd apparently just gotten off the plane and it was the first time he'd also used a scissor lift. And so, you know, he's just got in there and started making the work, and that's what I've always loved and admired about, you know, his work ethic.
Often the things that I've done have highlighted aspects of Koori culture that is not mine, but is of this place here. And so I guess the Waterwall, you can see that. If I look at it, there's like the hand stencils, there's the concentric circles and things that we've understood and read as uniquely Indigenous or Aboriginal. But there's a lot of other things that he does in his work. He seeks to give voice to issues that the fine art world may be removed from. So it's kind of interesting that it was attacked because he succeeded in challenging that system, didn't he?
Keith Haring's Waterwall being recreated today will be really interesting just because I think that looking at the different audiences of then and now, I think the reception of the mural will be treated really differently. There's a newfound appreciation in pop art and in Keith Haring today with a lot of young people and a new audience in Melbourne. So if anything, what will change is just the audience and its reception.
I'm curious, like I'm excited to see it. It was kind of like a marker maybe in change in the NGV's work that they bring inside their building.
You know, it's such an amazing work, so yeah, why not? It's this beautiful mural that still is a part of Haring.
You know, even though it's not painted by Haring, it's going to be a huge tribute to him. You know, and I know he's crossed a lot of sectors, you know, he has become a queer icon, an icon of the AIDS era and the terrible things that went on and the loss of a lot of creative people in that era. I think it's really important that we get to see that work reinstated and there'll be a new appreciation for it. We're not going to see a brick through the window this time, we're just going to see a tribute to an amazing artist.